This meeting is being recorded.
So today, this is who we are, right? The people behind today, as Maya introduced us. You have the beautiful Maya, me, and then Elena and Ibrahim. So it's an honor. All right, so as we begin, everybody, who are Circassians? So the definition of Circassians, the history and root of the term Caucasian, hopefully we'll be able to touch on that in our time together. So far from the names, I think pretty much everyone here, almost everyone here is Circassian or at least interested in the Caucasus, maybe adjacent. So the Circassians are an indigenous Northwest Caucasian ethnic group and nation native to the historical country region of Circassia in the North Caucasus, right? This is Circassian 101. And then who are Caucasians? Caucasian peoples are various indigenous groups living in the Caucasus, which harbors more than 30 separate peoples, ranging from language communities with only a few hundred speakers to large national groups numbering millions, making it a linguistic hotspot. This diversity is not of recent date. This is a historical ancient thing that's gone on in the Caucasus for a long time. You can even see it within the ecology. And in no other region of its size in the world are there so many different races and languages. One time I read it was the Horn of Africa that was like #2. So we really do have something so special and beautiful in terms of our homeland. Okay, so let's just geographically situate ourselves. Where are the Caucasus Mountains? Just tap yourself on the back if you've ever pulled out a map, if you had to explain where your people were from. Extra point if you carried one with you just for this question. So the Caucasus Mountains are nestled between the Black and Caspian Sea, and they divide the continents of Europe and Asia. There's always this ongoing debate of whether the Caucasus is European or is it Asian, depending on who wants to claim the region. I like to stick with Eurasia. I feel like that kind of covers all the bases. And it truly, truly is just like sandwiched between the two. So they're home to 30 indigenous ethnic groups, each with their own tribes, cultures, and customs. So with over 40 languages existing in the Caucasus, many of which are endangered, and I feel like we are all so aware of that as you know, Circassians, especially Caucasians. This issue of languages dying out, though, is not unique just to the Caucasus. I found some solace in that even within Russia, you know, the United States, different countries where there is colonization, language is just one of those things that ends up dying out without, you know, if it's not taken care of by the people. Okay, so again, as Maya mentioned, I have a page called Actually Caucasian, and this is kind of the base foundation of when I start to talk about what does it mean to be an actual Caucasian. This work here is done by the beautiful Elena. She put together a lot of the slides here, and then some of the slides are also from me. So you're going to see like a little mix in style. But this is her work, and I'll let her talk about why she made slides and all of that when it's her turn to talk. But this is just a timeline of the history of human classification as a science. So yeah, you can see over at Johann Blumenbach, which is the one that I like to pick on, and then Christoph Myers. So they were German, Austrian, you know, old guys in wigs, and they used to they created a scientific, you know, place for themselves where they were trying to categorize human beings and in a scientific way. And all of this just to justify colonization and the brutalities that were occurring around the world. and basically justify it. So, Johann Blumenbach and Christoph Meiners, like I said, these are the two that I like to pick on, but their work ended up becoming the foundation for like justifying slavery, justifying here in America, the Trail of Tears, the annihilation of the indigenous population, all the way to India, all the way down through the African continent to the Middle East. We're seeing it play out even today. In Palestine, this language of being subhuman versus, seeing someone as fully human. It all comes from this. And this is a pseudoscience, meaning that it has been disproved and debunked 1,000 times over. This is not really science, which is such a relief, right? To know that these guys, their work is basically means nothing. It does for me anyways. So yeah, these Blumenbach and Meiners, they're the ones who coined the term Caucasian. This 5 varieties of humans, you can look it up. It's disturbing. I have some stuff about it on my page. But yeah, that's the foundation of that. And then these are the actual Caucasians. So, in popular culture, we hear the audacity of the Caucasity, and we hear, oh, I speak Caucasian and I speak this. And it's all to say, it's all like in reference to the Western idea of what a Caucasian is, but, which means basically like vanilla or, mayonnaise. Like there's no flavor, there's no culture. It's just white yogurt, but then you see our people and you see the colors and the textures and the jewelry and the craft and the dancing and the food and the language, and it's like, yeah, no, it could not be anything, it could not be more the opposite of what the Western idea of a Caucasian is. It's just so rich and so beautiful and so diverse. So, I love these photos. This is an Elena slide. Okay, so another Elena slide. So these are some of the flags from the region. This is not an exhaustive list. So much personality, so cool. I mean, I would argue to say that our region has some of the coolest flags around. They're just so amazing when you just go through them. And yeah, so this is considerations when using the term Caucasian. Caucasian being used as a synonym for white sustains the myth that all white people share genetic or biological relatedness, which goes back to like Blumenbach and Meiners, saying that all white people originated from the Caucasus and the Caucasians are the epitome of the white race and the first white people and all of that. Continued usage perpetuates the notion of racial hierarchy. That's proved to be a problem, right? Pretty much on every continent. Caucasian is an outdated term and is not a more proper or scientific way to say white. So I'm just going to leave that there. Caucasian means white in the US, but it does not mean white in the Caucasus. Many ethnic Caucasian groups living in the Caucasus are not considered white by Russian standards, and they are racially discriminated against by ethnic Russians to this day. This shocks a lot of people, even generational diaspora Caucasians and Circassians. I've had multiple coming to God moments with some people on this topic. Whiteness is a hell of a drug, so a lot of people have a hard time separating themselves from that white card. But yeah, knowing that your people in their homeland are not even considered white should resonate on some level, like should blow your mind a little bit. Continued usage leads to erasure of the identity of ethnic Caucasians. So I just finished reading a book, and I know Elena did, and it's called The Unseen Truth by Sarah Lewis. It's a 100% absolute must-read, groundbreaking research by a Harvard professor. And she goes into great depth and detail, things that I've never read, and I've read a lot on this topic in regards to the intentional erasure of ethnic Caucasians in America in order to be able to use this word. So it's not an accident that nobody knows where the Caucasus is when you say, oh, I'm from the Caucasus, like, oh, what's the Caucasus? That's not an accident. So education is the healing, part of the biggest healer of this situation. So oh, thank you, Sammy. There you go. Yeah, sorry. All right, what's next? So how do we move forward from this, right, as a society? The term Caucasian is still used in the US today. It's supported by the government and is a remnant of the pseudoscience that incited and perpetuated the notion that humans exist in a racial hierarchy. As a fellow human being myself, I find it appalling that anybody would try to legitimize a racial hierarchy among humanity, which is kind of the fuel to my fire. Moving forward, we can be more intentional about how we use the term Caucasian and only use it when referring to the people of the Caucasus Mountain and their culture. Elena, this slide. When we remain curious about the terms we encounter and use, we may begin to see how our vocabulary influences our reality. There you go. Okay. I'm gonna hand it off to Maya at this point.
All right, thank you, Nour. Can I ask you that you manage the chat, please? Because I can't see it with my screen shared. To continue on what Nour has been building on, up until this point, we know who we are, we know where we come from, where we're located in the Caucasus. But that wasn't appealing to the Russian Empire. From around roughly 1763 to 1864, but it's estimated to be a lot longer than this, but this is what we have data on. For 101 years, the Circassians fought in what became known as a genocide. They fought to maintain their lands, they fought to preserve their identity and their culture for 101 years. Russia committed this genocide against us in an effort to cleanse our ethnicity from the land. As a result of this genocide, about 2 million Circassians were killed or deported via ships to the Ottoman Empire. It's estimated that 500,000 Circassians perished in the Black Sea, but we all know from other genocides that are even currently happening now that that estimate is usually an underestimate of the amounts of people that go unaccounted for. But it is estimated that 3% of our population survived, and those who survived and made it to the Ottoman Empire then went on a whole journey to where we are today. So 1864 and May 21st specifically is a big day for us because it marks the day that our Circassian soldiers surrendered and were defeated in their last battle. And that scene, there's a picture of it in the next few slides. That scene has been painted so many times and is described as one of the hardest scenes that were witnessed back then because of, you could see people dying from hunger, from famine, they were exhausted, their women were being kidnapped, they were just defeated on all fronts and then put onto ships and sent to the Ottoman Empire to basically die on the way to the Ottoman Empire. This is the scene that's often portrayed as how they looked right before they were shipped off. There was a deal that was agreed on between the Russian Empire and the Ottoman Empire to take on the Circassians that they didn't want to keep. And the Ottoman Empire loved the idea of having these Muslim warriors to come and help them build the Ottoman Empire. And by then, Circassians had accepted Islam, and some look at this as a way that we survived as the reason that we were even able to flee our homes and be accepted somewhere else. And others have different outlooks on that. But ultimately, what we know is that we were sent to the Ottoman Empire and we became integrated in the Ottoman Empire, and we fought to build that empire for them. And the Circassian presence in the Ottoman Empire and what became known as the Levant later goes back to the Mamluk era. And Mamluk in Arabic means enslaved or owned by someone else, because they were enslaved at that time and sold to help build this empire. Among the most peoples that moved to Turkey were Adige, Wubukhs, Muslim Abkhazians, and the Shapsugh tribe, which had numbered some 300,000, but was reduced to 3,000 people. The 140 Shapsugh that remained were sent to Siberia. Overall, we have calculations, including those taken into account. The Russian government's own archival figures, as well as the Ottoman figures, have estimated a loss of 90% up to 97% of the Circassian nation in process. And they resettled. Once they got to the Ottoman Empire, they weren't welcomed with houses and care packages and places to stay, but they had to fight to stay, and many of them continued to suffer in the Ottoman Empire and had to assimilate, to learn the language, to become part of the society in order to continue surviving. Qadir Amwa Qadir, Allah yarhamu, who some of us may know him from the CBA, he argued that Ottomans co-opted the Circassians into a police force in the Balkans, as well as for settling them to increase the local Muslim population, with Circassians made to take arms against rebellions, even those Circassians that had not settled in affected regions. And after our deportation, our lands in the Caucasus were assigned to North Caucasian refugees by the Ottoman government, but the locals refused to give up their homes. We know that some remained in what is known today as Russia, and those groups consisted of Circassians and Chechens. There are some Abkhazians who remained and are in what is known as Abkhazia today, and the rest who fled settled in Syria. Syria became one of the biggest countries that hosted Circassians, alongside Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, and Egypt, just the entire Levant region. And in Syria, they established their little villages in towns known as Quneitra, Jolan, Homs, Hama, and Majus Sultan, and even in Aleppo, in the rural cities of Aleppo. And they have been trying to survive in the diaspora since. We all know that the state that the Levant has been in has caused more stress on our Circassian families in the diaspora or in exile. And just after their resettling in Jolan, the 1967 war broke out between Syria and Israel, where Israel confiscated that city, and Circassians were deported once again. Most of them fled to Damascus, and then others spread out more. Some came to the west, to America, Canada, and throughout the Levant region. And since then, in 2011, there was another civil war in Syria that forced half the Circassian population to flee Syria once again. So we have been on a resettling journey since we left our homeland. We have tried our best to integrate in the countries we were settled in, and we've learned the languages, we became accustomed to those identities, but unfortunately we haven't been stable in many places since then. So where are Circassians today? Turkey hosts the largest Circassian population of up to 4 million people, and it's estimated that there are 6 million Circassians around the world, divided in over 50 countries. And every year on May 21st, this day brings us together from different parts of the world, and you'll see Circassians going out in the streets, holding up signs, and dressed up in their traditional costumes to say, we are still here. We will remain, even if not in your own definitions, but we know where we come from. And that was our intention to be here today, to remember where our ancestors came from and where we are today. 161 years post the genocide, 161 years after this event took place, this is where we are today. And I'm going to pass this back to Nour to tell us a bit about the slide that she put together of a screenshot of all genocided peoples as per Wikipedia.
So I, put together, presentations for other online events, and I created this slide a while ago. These are just screen grabs from the Wikipedia page for genocide of indigenous people, and you can see the Circassian genocide highlighted in black in two places. Under genocide of indigenous peoples, and then documented or accused instances. And I remember the first time gazing at this list on my screen and just like, it hurts a lot to see our people, among such horrific crimes against humanity. But at the same time, I took this as like, these are the people that I want to have solidarity with. And of course, this list does not include the Palestinians, which is why I made a little visual to kind of commemorate what they're currently enduring, hopefully not for much longer. And yeah, I mean, I look at them, I'm like, these are my family. These people are going to know how it feels. The Circassian genocide I read is considered the first modern genocide. And, it kind of laid the groundwork for modern genocides to come, including like starvation tactics and just, burning down villages and these sort of things. So unfortunately, we have something in common with every single group here and every situation here, something. And if you follow along on my page, you know that I'm a big advocate for solidarity, non-transactional solidarity. Don't look for anything in return. I'm standing with you here because I know your pain, even if you haven't heard of mine, right? So that's kind of what this page is about. So you can find it on Wiki, you can kind of go through it, and just kind of maybe contemplate how much, commonality there is between all of these people. Okay. Okay.
There we are.
All right. So now that the presentation is complete, we're going to be moving on to the storytelling part of this event. And you're going to hear from basically the four of us about different questions that are, pertain to, who we are, why we do this, what do certain terms mean to us. And hopefully, there will be something in each story that will touch and resonate with, people in the audience, all of you here that are with us today.
Yes, thank you, Nour. We are going to start with getting to know Nour a little bit more on a personal level, knowing where she comes from, where her family comes from, and let's see if I can pin you so we could, yeah, there we are.
Okay.
All right, Nour, if you want to start telling us a little bit about yourself and what does it mean for you to be Circassian today?
Okay. My family's original Circassian name is Sago. So my name, Sarah, is the Arabized version of that name. I know that I have family in Jordan, and I know that I also have family in Kabardino-Balkaria. I stalk them on Instagram. My father's tribe can be traced back to Baksan in Kabardino-Balkaria, making me Kabardian. I was born in Syria, but moved to New Jersey in 1988 when I was 2 years old as a political refugee from the Assad regime. My parents' families both fled from the Golan Heights in 1967 when their over 100-year-old villages were occupied and razed by Israeli forces. I haven't been able to go back to Syria since then, thus causing like a huge sever between my nuclear family and a lot of my extended family. I mean, I have first cousins I've never met. Luckily, I mean, whether it's lucky or not, Maya and her sisters and her mom were able, and her grandmother were able to come to America. So I've had the opportunity to get to know them as an adult. I've always been like acutely aware of the differences between myself and like my classmates and even myself and other Circassian children that I interacted with when I was younger. Growing up in a home where my parents tried to balance our lives with a political asylum, legal status had a very unique set of challenges that even my closest friends really couldn't relate to. All of these years later, and through all of it, after obtaining my citizenship in my 20s and gathering information through personal efforts to learn about my ancestors, like becoming a mom, relocating many times, including a 18-month stay in Turkey during the pandemic. And now with the hope of visiting Syria, possibly back on the table and eventually maybe even our homeland, I've spent a lot of my life trying to process and understand like what does it mean to be a Diga living in generational diaspora, and what will that mean for my children and my progeny moving forward. I created my page back in 2021 in order to raise awareness around the history and the use of the word Caucasian in the Western world, humanize our people, and like so much more than that. You know, there's just facts and tidbits on there. It's my honor and privilege to speak with other Northern Caucasians of all backgrounds as a whole who understand the value of what it means to revitalize and reconnect with our collective ancestry. I've leaned on the wisdom and genius of other ethnic groups, such as the First Peoples Nations and Black community here in the United States, as I navigated for answers within the context of my identity. And the deepest core of my values, I have a passion for our mothers, you know, all like mothers in our community, their well-being and their respect, as well as those among us who are forced to relocate, beginning life again from scratch in foreign lands, oftentimes with children. So I believe that the measure of our success as a community doesn't lie in how high or how successful a few of us have been able to become, but rather how are we taking care of those that are the most vulnerable among us. That's kind of where I feel my brain trying to solve this problem. So hopefully you guys pray for me that I'm able to do something with that. Inshallah. So, you know, what does it mean to be a Circassian? You know, coming from me, it means to be an indigenous person of the North Caucasus. Now, that word indigenous was not really something that entered my periphery when I was younger and growing up. But I see it over and over and over again, and I really internalized this concept. And once you do that, you don't ever really go back. You take other indigenous people as, you know, your relatives, your family. When I was in Turkey for those 18 months, I was asked, where are you from? Like over 100 times. Like, where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? The Turks, you know, they have like such curiosity because so many people pass through their through their borders. And I would reply, oh, I'm Cherkess from California. And it was always like positive feedback. Oh, Cherkess, that's so cool. We didn't know there's Cherkess in California, just in Turkey or whatever. And I'm like, nope, we're there, we're all over. It was really cool being somewhere that I didn't need a map to explain myself, or like 15 minutes with that person. Um, and then there was this, and I'm gonna say it was like a life-changing event. I got to see Kabardinka perform in the city of Kedikoy. I went alone because it was like late and it was like COVID, and I was like, I wanted to go, but I couldn't bring my family with me. And it was one of the most beautiful things I had ever experienced, like till today. The happiness in the room, the joy was so potent. It was just like, it was breathtaking. And something in my DNA woke up. Like I could just feel like my ancestors going through my veins. I was having like a full out of body experience. I was crying. It was a lot. But I came to the realization that as a people, we were whole once. We were whole. Like, even though we were a warrior people and we had, we've always had like fights and stuff, as all indigenous people do, there was like a beauty and love and wisdom that existed within our, you know, cultural system that you can find today, like in small pockets around the world, but truly it's like an echo of what once was. Um, and I want to know, I want to know everything about that. I just want to know all of that stuff. Their relationship with the earth, their ethics, their sarcasm, their stories. And I made it a mission to search for what it means to be Circassian in spite of the trauma, and to celebrate our people along with other ethnic Caucasian people as well. Much love to them. And in what they've been able to accomplish, and how us regular people, how are we carrying culture and tradition in our hearts on a day-to-day basis. So I learn more about what it means Circassian every time I speak to one, because we're not a monolith, especially us in diaspora. We come in such a huge variety of interests and talents, and just it's incredible. And yet we're bound together by this, by our ancestors and by history. And it just like, it's so beautiful to me. I have here, how do we stand against genocide as descendants of genocide? So obviously this is for the um, Genocide Memorial. And I mentioned earlier with that slide on genocide. So I've always felt a gravitational pull to the stories of genocide that plague this earth. Circassians learn very early on in our lives about the genocide. And this collective memory fuses with our identity, like the way that we see ourselves. And the more I learn about my own history and watch world events unfold, the more firmly I stand in complete solidarity with people who are, being injured. Their entire identity is being injured by genocide. And I ask for nothing of them in return. I have a 100% non-transactional, way of dealing with solidarity. And I don't believe you have to be a descendant of genocide to feel solidarity with your fellow human being. You just have to be human. You have to be connected to your heart. But especially like being from a people that were deeply affected by genocide in more ways than we can really appreciate. I know that once a people have been touched by genocide, they're ultimately never the same again. So like 161 years after the conclusion of us being forced out of our homeland, we're still talking about it. We're still dealing with it. We still carry generational trauma. You know, especially if like legislation is in place to like to subjugate and disenfranchise those people. So unfortunately, this is a tale as old as time. But I myself, I chose my allies a long time ago. I have no problem with knowing who I stand with and where I stand, thankfully. Um, in terms of like, what was that, Maya?
I was gonna say, well, that's beautiful and very, very inspiring to hear.
Thank you so much. Just one more bit, Maya.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be
go
like,
for it. Go for it.
so I have here like, how have I reclaimed my identity? In the West, it's felt like I've been fighting to retain my identity in all aspects, in all regards, for as long as I've been aware of it. The more I push to reclaim my identity, I always have felt like a pushback, you know, from somewhere. But there's also a part of me that refuses to allow the world to lump me into a category without my consent. My children, they continuously fuel my fire as well because I have no clue what the world is going to look like when they're my age. Um, all I know is that it's my job to pass down the information that I'm acquiring in like a loving way so they can keep it close to their heart. The world is always going to try to convince you about who you are. Every system we live in and under would prefer you to stay ignorant, simply forget, or follow along with the crowd and be absorbed and distracted. So if who you are means anything to you, you don't have the luxury of sitting around idly. The culture needs your magic, okay? It needs your love and your resilience. It needs your healing. Probably that should be the first thing on the list. Culture is a living, breathing entity. It's not something that you put behind a glass case and every once in a while you pass by it and you're like, oh, that's so beautiful, and you just keep going. It needs you to uncover untold stories or find a way to share your own so that our voice, the voice of our people, does not disappear.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nour.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I feel like I got to know more bits and pieces about what fuels your passion for this, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And now it's your turn. Um, I have a few questions here. Just, would you like to go question by question?
However you wanna,
Okay.
you could,
So,
you could steer.
okay. So, what tribe or tribes is your family from?
Okay. So my mom is Circassian Qabardeh on both sides of her family, and my father is, his mom is Qabardeh and his father is Abkhazian. So I am a culmination of that. I identify as both Circassian and Abkhazian, and when my great great grandparents went to the Ottoman Empire and then eventually to Jolan, my family settled in the Golan Heights on both sides. So my grandmother from my mom's side actually knew my grandmother from my father's side, and it's really beautiful when they tell the story that we lived in such close proximity to each other that we all just knew each other. Um, yeah, that's the history of my family to the Jolan. And then from the Jolan, we moved to Damascus later. My grandparents were the ones that moved to Damascus after the occupation in 1967. And then I myself moved to America in 2013 after the Syrian civil war. So we've been just on a really constant moving journey since we really left our homeland.
Yeah, unstable ground, right?
Yeah.
How do you express your Circassian identity today, along with your Syrian background, while living in America?
Ooh. Yeah, that's really where the challenge and the beauty has been in reclaiming these parts of my identity. Because being born in Syria, people knew who Circassians were. I mean, when I was very young, my parents didn't like explicitly say you're Circassian. They were just like, you're different. You belong from somewhere else other than this country as well. And then I think when I was a little bit older, like seventh grade, is when I learned, oh, we are this culture. But everyone around us knew who Circassians were. So it wasn't something like I had to explain or plot a map or feel like I was totally different, like from another planet. No, they knew Circassians. But then moving to America and having to spend my adolescence here and like even shift my, the way I think to English instead of Arabic, added another layer to, okay, so I was born in Syria and now I'm away from that place. So what was that part of my life about, right? Like what is the fact that I speak Arabic? What does that do to me today? How does that live in me today? And what is the fact that I descend from the Caucasus Mountains do to me today? How does that influence me? And now I live in America. So in the beginning, it felt really constricting in my body for the first few years. I would say from the ages of like 16 to 20, maybe, I felt very just angry with this fact that I don't know where I'm from. Like I truly didn't know where I was from. None of these places felt like I could claim them in a way that felt right for me. So there was a lot of anger in the beginning, up until I just decided to see like what would happen here if I looked at this anger. I moved to college. I moved to the dorms when I was in college, so I had to live away from home and away from the community in New Jersey, which really asked of me to look at myself and the ways I identify outside of the community. So now going beyond the Circassians and someone asking me, where are you from? I would notice what my responses were. And when I didn't know where I was from or what Circassian even sounds like or what Circassian looks like, I felt embarrassed and ashamed and a bunch of other things. But eventually sitting with those feelings really invited me to start digging, well, okay, then what is Circassian and what is Syrian? And what of that lives in me today? And today, in this moment, I'm somewhere that feels very connected to these two parts of myself. I feel so connected to the place I was born and raised in and to the Arabic language. And I feel the same to my Circassian roots. And I feel this deep yearning. It's intensified, I think, with having this dual identity. This yearning to connect with the spoken word of my ancestors is intensified, and to the culture and to our music and our plants, our animals. I don't even know what animals lived in the Caucasus. I don't know what kinds of foods, what kinds of plants are native there. Um, so yeah, all of that has invited me to keep seeking. And I'm not somewhere where I know it all today, but I am continuously seeking.
It's so beautiful, Maya. Thank you so much for sharing that. What are some values you learned through culture that you've internalized and live by?
The biggest one is our understanding of respect for all, or what we call khabza. Um, before before my parents really taught me about religion, that was the main teaching in the house, is respect for all. That was the governing, like no matter what you do, you respect your elders who's younger than you. And when you go to spaces where they're not Circassian or they are Circassian, you operate with this form of respect. And that I feel travels with me anywhere I go. In any way I look at a human or an animal, or when I walk down the street, I have this reverence for the places I enter because I'm just taught to look at the world with such respect that all of it is holy. Like it's all deserving of respect. And I think that really has shaped the way I walk this earth, the way I carry myself, just having, this utmost like gratitude for all life force. And then on a smaller note, like learning how to dance Circassian, it influences how I move in the world, even like the way just my hands flow, the way I walk, the way I move is really shaped by the years I spent dancing and learning how to hold my posture up and feeling like a conduit for those dances that came before me. And that was the biggest place I connected with myself for a long time, through dancing and channeling those movements.
You know how indigenous you sound right now? You sound so indigenous, Maya. And I feel like we already answered this question with just, your beautiful responses, but I'm gonna ask it anyways, just as a final kind of touch, like a recap. So, I have here, what place does culture and identity have in your life? Like, how important is it
Mm.
to you?
It's important in me knowing myself. It's important for me to know sometimes why I gravitate towards the things I gravitate towards, why I'm so curious about language and words and the ways that you can describe something in 50 ways. Like I'm so curious and hungry for the words and then the tools to describe things in words and in language. And I try to express both every day, just while living normal life. For me, culture lives in like the small ways that I move around. I don't like to think of it as something I have to step into, but something as inherently a part of me that I choose to consciously express. And it looks and it comes out through writing, through any creative act I like to do, through making music, through humming, through learning how to play our instruments, the baraban, um, and just all those feelings that it evokes in me. But I will say that culture is very, very important, but it is not a tool or a means to separate us, or to look at another human and say you are different than me because you're not Circassian or because you are not from the same place I'm from. A culture for me should not be a tool to divide us. If we choose to wear culture, then it has to bring us closer with respect for every other culture, but not from a hierarchical place, not from a nationalist place, not from a I'm better than you mentality, because we are not. We are incredible and amazing, and we have so much beauty in our culture, but that does not make us better than any other culture, I believe.
If I could hug you, I'd hug you right now. That was just so beautiful. Thank you so much, Maya, for such a just eloquent and lovely, just getting to know you in this
Thank
way.
you, Nour.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Next, I'm so excited to hear from our guest speakers. So first up, we have Elena. She is going to share her story. But before she does, I'm going to just introduce her a little bit. So she's going to talk to us a little bit about how advocacy work, about the advocacy work that she's done, recently. And then what does activism for her look like today in Iowa, which is where she's coming to us from. And then like Elena, like some of your personal or collective goals that you have regarding education and maybe teaching others, and then your own learning about the Caucasus.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Nour.
Mhm.
Yeah, my name's Elena Samawi. I'm a hospice social worker in Iowa, and I just graduated this past Friday from grad school. I'm an international adoptee. So I was adopted from Nalchik, Kabardino-Balkaria, when I was 3 years old. Grew up in the U.S. with typical European American upbringing. I did grow up privileged. However, I never knew my ethnicity. And I always assumed that I was Russian because I'm from Russia. I didn't discover that I was Kabardian until 3 years ago when I did a DNA test. and found my biological family. And they live in Kabardino-Balkaria. So ever since then, I've been learning Russian so that I can easily speak with them now. But eventually I do want to learn Kabardian and become fluent in that so I can speak to them in that. I have a passion for social work and language, so that's where I became interested in addressing the problematic use of the term Caucasian in the US. And here in the US, people have heard of the term Caucasian and use it regularly to describe any white or light-skinned person. It's been used this way for over 100 years. So I've been kind of trying to change that and encourage people to start using it to describe people from the Caucasus Mountains or their culture and their history. And so the presentation, the slides you've seen reflect that. I presented those slides at my local public library this past Saturday. And they also mentioned the Circassian Genocide, just because I felt it would be impossible to talk about the Caucasus and the people of the Caucasus without talking about the largest genocide that occurred there. So yeah, so I would say that's kind of like, a question I get is like, why do I care? I grew up pretty much American, and didn't seem to start doing any of this until I found out that I was Circassian, but I care because I would say it has something to do with my educational background in social work. Social work here in the US typically aims to make the voices of Indigenous people heard. It works to preserve the Indigenous culture and fight against injustice. However, you don't have to be a social worker or go to college to engage in advocacy or activism. I care because I saw injustice. When I read about the Circassian Genocide, heard about the Sochi Winter Olympics, I see how there have been attempts to silence Circassian voices and erase Circassian culture, and I believe this is wrong. There comes a time when you feel something like bone deep coursing through your blood, a sense that you have a responsibility to care. That's what I've felt ever since. So I view my very adoption as kind of an attempt to erase Circassian culture because it didn't allow me to grow up in the culture or speak the language.
Elena, what can you tell us about the community of Caucasians in Iowa? Is there a community there?
I know that there is a community of Armenians in Iowa City. They've invited me to a picnic this fall, but I have not yet found other Circassians in Iowa.
Fun fact, there is a gentleman on this call that went to school in Iowa.
Yep.
We were about this beforehand.
We were talking about that beforehand. I went to school in Iowa State and then went to Fairfield for not too long, for maybe like 7-8 months. But yeah, I was looking when I was there. I was looking for some Circassians, and that was a challenge.
Oh, oh wow. Wow. Well, that's really great to hear. Yeah, it's just it is a big city, and I'm sure somewhere in Iowa there are Circassians or Circassians. I kind of view myself as an advocate of Circassian culture. I was led to this point through educating myself about the Circassians but I'm not done learning. You know, there's still a lot to learn, a lot of books to read. So I'm excited to do that. So I would say, like, what it means for me to be Circassian today in Iowa. I'd say it means to recognize kind of how far from the culture I am here in Iowa, yet besides all the odds, being adopted and removed from the homeland, being made oblivious to my ethnicity and existence of Circassians and Circassia, I'm still here, and I know the truth now, so I might as well make it worthwhile and be a part of related efforts. I want people here in my community in Iowa City to recognize genocide and learn about Circassians. So and I've been spreading the word. So I get excited at the thought of people telling other people who tell other people. So it's just like a little seed.
That is so beautiful, Elena. That's so beautiful. You said that you have you made in the beginning when we were talking about your family, you said that you know you have family in Kabardino-Balkaria, and that you're learning Russian so you can speak with them. And then yesterday when we were talking, and you mentioned it now, that you are planning on learning Kabardian, and we have to get you a fascia, we have to get you like a dress, right? I think it's safe to say you just made a whole room full of friends, you know, moving forward. You know me, I'm a resource to you as much as you ever need me to be, like, in whatever way. There was something I was gonna ask you, and I totally spaced out, but thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that there's so much that you haven't said, but I personally, I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing from you and what you can accomplish over in Iowa City. I got my popcorn, I'm ready and waiting. So thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena, for being honest and vulnerable and being on this journey with us. We are honored to know you. Truly, I am honored to know you and to hopefully be a Circassian, you know, in New Jersey when you decide to visit.
Yay, that's so nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm gonna hover over to this box that says Ibrahim Sharkas to spotlight for everyone.
Hello.
Welcome, Ibrahim. This
Last,
is
last to go, least to speak.
I don't know about that. We'll see.
I hope so.
Thank you, Ibrahim, for being here with us. Ibrahim is a friend
My
and
pleasure.
someone I deeply respect and learned from. And he has agreed to come on tonight to talk to us a little bit about generational trauma. What does it mean? Why is it relevant? And how can this experience influence us as descendants of this genocide? How does generational trauma live in our bodies today? And if there is a toolbox that he could open up and share with us some tools of how can we begin to heal from this?
I don't know if I can answer that in a very short way then, so I take that back. My first comment. So I may have to say a lot to this. I think I feel and I know, as somebody who practices in the field and has the privilege to essentially work on the constructs, on the nuances, on the invisible etchings that latch onto what we call linguistically trauma, is so challenging to really face it. And I think I came in here with, there was one line that I actually spoke with somebody this morning, a client that I was working with. The body can remember what a border erased, the soul has a tendency to metabolize what the family could not express, and the I can be redefined not by trauma, but by integration. With intergenerational trauma, where I actually call it more so, and I lean more towards this narrative of transgenerational trauma, is a lot of times it's usually interchanged or interused, at least how I'm trained. I think first one has to kind of understand how that actually works. I think today the beauty is with a lot of the scientific findings that we have with like epigenetics, with people looking into how the body actually adapts and takes on trauma. So many things are hidden and laced within ourselves. So I want to kind of do a really quick hop over to how or where it can actually heal. But I think I want to answer this whole thing with Circassian identity, if I can, if that's okay. I think this probably is a
Yeah.
powerful point that may add value to people.
Yeah, please.
Never in my life, in truth, I really latched on to understanding or wanting to know more about my Circassian identity up until I was maybe 20, early to mid 20s. I had the privilege when I started getting or wanting to get into the field more of mental health to work with a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist was not Circassian. He was almost 80 years old, traveled extensively around the world. And the first question that he asked me was, where am I from? And notoriously, I would always answer Earth. And then people would say, whoa, really? You're from Earth? I was like, yes, I am. So I see what they say, and I'm intrigued as a conduit to study humanness and human interaction, how they react. And he laughed and he asked me, really, where are you from? And imagine this, 6 foot plus old man, gray hair with a big beard. Saying, where are you from, boy? And I said, Circassian. And then he chuckled and he says, ah, your people were so connected to God until religion came and changed the narrative a little bit. And I said, what does this guy is actually trying to point to and tell me here? And then that led me on a spin to understand transpersonal work, which integrates a deeper understanding of trauma being held by spirituality and the study of the soul, to psychosomatic work in the body. And one thing I think that I found intriguing, now fast forward as a lover of capoeira, I love playing capoeira. If nobody knows what that is, maybe one person knows what that is, it combines music, martial arts, dance, song, singing, training, and philosophy in one that has its indigenous roots based on easily found within slavery and a lot of aspects of West African mysticism. So why am I fascinated by that? Where in my ancestry, where else do they combine dance and fighting and singing and song and philosophy and storytelling? Maybe somewhere in the Caucasus. I don't know, maybe there's truth to this. But the fascinating thing now, full circle, maybe how can one release trauma from the body? I think one, it's probably important to have a sentiment or a gaze of awareness of it, naming it, learning about it, kind of what we just started in this approach today in the beginning. But then adjacent to this awareness, one must have a lived experience to cement a clear process through to grasp understanding. So we need knowledge and we need a lived experience. Culturally, I've been fascinated by somatic work in dance. And I'm no expert in Circassian dance. So Maya probably never saw me, nobody ever saw me dance Circassian because I don't do that. But capoeira has dance. And then I started to understand and wanting to learn a little bit more as currently a doctoral student, about to be a doctoral candidate. I'm fascinated by somatics, psychedelics, and entheogenics, how they actually combine with indigenous groups. One of them was with Bedouin tribes, specifically Bedouin women, but I've also been fascinated how dance and was there any entheogenic work in the Caucasus being used for initiatory rites? And as many of us probably know, the oral tradition is really difficult to write things down for us to track. So maybe I got to tune in a little bit more here and feel things out. But there was one person who happened to write a book, and I have to find my way to pull it apart or pull it up on the Caucasus and the dance rituals of the Caucasus. But there was one line that I remember I wrote down. It was this person saying that he noticed our group to dance was once to remember God. not through words, but through rhythm. And by him watching the people of the Caucasus, he said there was an essence etched to it. And I remember talking to Maya yesterday as I drove back home from Canada, or maybe the day before as my delirious drive. There was one person who once shared, it was an old uncle of the Caucasus telling a young buck, how does one learn the dances? And he said, the translation was, Circassians are just born to do it. They know what to do. It's in their DNA. And I'm like, what is this ritual rite? So if, as a somatic practitioner, examining the Caucasus, examining dance rituals of the Caucasus, I'll keep it at that, I can at least see as somebody observing it, there is deep levels of emotional regulation, deep levels of community engagement, co-regulation, and not trauma bonding, but trauma processing through aspects of movement, which has what Nour, you talked about, wholeness, remembrance. Maya, you talked about posture. There's this level of holding a posture that transmits a direct line through ancestry. So to answer, how does one get how does trauma actually come about? Certainly through war. We've seen that happen time and time again. There's modern day studies of that and what actually happens on an epigenetic level, let alone a psychosomatic level. So I think probably through movement and maybe tapping into some rights that we have. Not sure if I answered your question. Tried to give a history lesson there at the same time.
Oh, it was wonderful, like a beautiful full circle weaving of that.
God willing.
So, in conclusion of that circle, what tools do you have for us to start this process of feeling into the trauma that lives in our bodies?
Oh, I think the first thing is I want to do this as sincere and in service as possible to everybody on this call. I think the first thing is probably, if you have a curiosity about that and you want to go into that, find somebody who is professionally trained. I think there lies an extensive amount of merit to work with somebody who can be a vessel or a mirror to see some things that you can't see. So that's probably step number one. Adjacent to step number one is noticing breath, noticing sensations in the body, engaging sincerely with the body, and if we're talking about experienced knowledge, dance. Maybe if all of us have this shared background, maybe there is something etched in dance and movement and shaking. But I think it would probably be that order, finding first somebody that can stand with you in the utmost sincerity and service of you, in a professional landscape as a therapist, a clinician, or a coach, or just somebody who has that, is trauma informed to work with somebody at that capacity. And then probably directly adjacent to that is noticing one's breath and also simultaneously noticing the story that one tells themselves about who they are. It's such an interesting question that you ask, Maya. And can I add one more last thing without taking too much time?
Absolutely. You have time.
As a therapist, I think, and Osama, my friend, not from Iowa now, from New Jersey, deep friend here is on this call too. He's probably gonna see a connection to what I'm about to say now. But as a clinician, I've noticed there's 4 core problems that really people come to want to work through or work with. It is, who am I, which we've completely talked about on this call. Where am I going? Where am I from? And what's my purpose? No matter what message is attached to that or what experience is currently happening or past wound or past trauma or even current lived experience, no matter what, it actually all falls to that. And to go a little bit curling back on the last question that was asked to Maya, it was something on the significance of our cultural background. You know, I think if one can hold up the lens of culture and use that as a vessel and a vehicle to discover who they truly are, that alone has the ability to heal ancestral trauma and work things out. We are all conduits on this call to essentially be stewards, um, to not only bow down our hats to people we don't know, and will probably never know, but through healing ourselves and working these kinks out, that in and of itself has such a deep, broader reach, and it breathes breath into life where dance culture, it goes way beyond that. So if this is so, if one can use what does it mean to be Circassian as a conduit to learn more about the essence of who they are, it starts to possibly knock on the door of what I think our ancestors were doing all along, dancing around a tree, or dancing around a place where the lightning striked, or an indigenous group in Brazil hitting a stick and playing a song, like, hey, what is that happening there? They're pointing to something. And if we can use our consciousness and our heart to understand with compassion and mercy what they're pointing to, we may be able to have this direct line of healing with our ancestors today. So hope that helped and added value. I'm unsure if it did because it was all from the soul. So we'll see where this goes.
Well, that's where the beauty comes from, really,
Pleasure.
the soul. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. You were getting a lot of love in the chat, and I know in all of our hearts we were feeling the deep resonance of your words, these experiences that were just really beautifully said and described. And yeah, what a beautiful place to be, to feel that we don't need much to get started. We can get started with who we are, where we are, and you can take that wherever you want.
I'm personally just like letting that all soak in. I've been so interested in this subject ever since becoming a mother. And Ibrahim, you have to write a book, please. Write a book. I can wait. I'm patient. However long it takes, I will read. I'll be the first person to purchase it, I think.
Well, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Shameless plug. He is an author. He has multiple books, maybe not about Circassians, but poetry books that are talk about the heart of the matter, the soul. Absolutely phenomenal work. And not because I've known him for 21 years, but because the work is actually insanely amazing. So, but yes, to your request of writing a book, absolutely.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm so happy to hear that.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Can I share one more thing, Nour, just on that? It's like literally 30 seconds or less.
Of course, please.
With the responsibility that I think a lot of us have, in this, within the subset of this culture that we all are present in. There's one character that I've been finding so fascinating, probably for the past 15 years. He was a philosopher and a pseudo-psychologist, I would say, because there was no licensing back then. The APA didn't exist in the late 1800s. He happened to be from a city, born in the city of Kars, or near the city of Kars, which is in the Caucasus. And he was a student of dance. And he said a quote, and I recently met with a scholar talking about Circassians at a sushi restaurant in New York, ironically enough, who knew? And the scholar left me with something. He was, Roger is now almost 90 years old. He said that this philosopher used to say one saying: the first generation seeks the truth. The second generation preserves it. The third generation forgets it. And then the fourth generation denies it. So if we cyclically see where we sit on this timeline from the genocide, the awful happenings of just raw human, cardinal, animalistic points of acts of aggression, I am better than thou, which is terrible. Where are we on this makeup? And then a question that I usually ask myself is, where is my responsibility in this? Not to, echoing what Maya, you said so beautifully, nationalistic identity to this, but how can I use this to steward a path forward to break the chain of continuous trauma? That's all that I want to leave. I think that was a very important quote by somebody from the Caucasus, fellow philosopher.
Okay, what was the philosopher's name?
George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. He was born in Alexanderpol at that time, who is, you know, as Osama knows, he's one of my favorite characters ever. I'm fascinated by this individual. Mixed bag, so be very conscious of what you read from this person.
Okay, no, that's everybody. It's
I just
everyone.
wanted to preface that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That is very, very interesting, very cool. I appreciate it so much. Guys, I'm overflowing with like just gratitude right now for this, all of that we've talked about. And it is with such, you know, I don't know, I'm so grateful, but we are going to be I'm going to be giving the closing remarks, and then we're going to open it up for questions or any of that stuff. So I'll be quick. Please, if you walk away with anything from today's event, let it be the idea that you are enough. If we can make peace with that fact and work to reconnect with our ancestry in spite of life and all the messages we've received along the way, then you can too, okay? Find that point of contention that fires you up and dive in. My advice, my humble advice would be to take your attention back to the homeland and learn about it, then try to branch out. Everything about our homeland is so beautiful. As Maya mentioned, the animals, the plants, everything. The way even the modern Circassians there continue to move culture forward is so elegant and so exciting. So that's kind of just where I want to leave everybody off. Like, you know, between Elena's story and Ibrahim's story, Maya, I mean, every single person here has just, you know, their own unique story. It's all valid, it's all important, it's all cool and amazing. I really need to get back to interviewing on my page because this is just the best part of, I think, being Circassian is just hearing everyone else's about their life and what they think and how they process their identity. But Maya, you know, I know you're the host here, but would you like to open up?
Yeah, we can open it up. Thank you so much, Nour, for that closing. And if I can add that there isn't, to add on what you said, there isn't one way to be Circassian. There isn't even two ways. There endless ways of what a Circassian identity can look like. And you can be an artist and be Circassian. You can be in fashion and be Circassian. You can be a gamer. You could be anywhere on the spectrum from all different identities and still belong. Even if you don't fit in the binary identity, Circassian identity that's often assigned to us by our smaller communities in tight-knit places where Circassians live, but that you have a right to reclaim what this is for you. And on that note, I would love to open it up if anyone has any questions to anyone that spoke today, or if you want to just say hi, let us know where you're from, where you live. We have some time for that.
Come on.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Question for Elena. Fascinating life story. Not just because it's related to being Circassian or anything like that. Just in general, it's a fascinating life story. To find, to not have known about the cultural background, and then recently finding about that. I'm curious to hear about what was that process for you? What was that experience like internally for you? To finding where your family is from and the culture that's associated with the family. And part two to that question is, how has that shaped, if it did, your career as far as being a social worker? Like, did that do anything in your career as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess it kind of starts back at doing like the DNA tests. I don't know how many people have done those DNA tests, like Ancestry, 23andMe. It does a lot for someone who's adopted because we might grasp onto those results as part of our identity, whatever those results are. But those results don't say Circassian, they say Turkish, because the majority of Circassians live in Turkey. That's where it's pulling its data from. So for a little bit, I thought I was Turkish. So I was looking up everything Turkey. I started to envision myself with like a Turkish flag, like, so that influences my identity, how I carry myself forward. And then I did another DNA test, my heritage DNA, found a cousin, a second cousin through there. And that was pretty much the breakthrough to finding my biological family. And then they told me that they were Kabardian. And I had no idea what that was. I'd never heard of that. I had even FaceTimed with them for a few times, like maybe 4 times, and by the fourth time they were speaking a different language. They weren't speaking Russian. And I had no idea that they spoke a different language. And then they didn't tell me about the genocide. I looked it up. I looked up Circassian, and like the first Wikipedia page that pops up is the genocide. And I read the whole thing. And by the end of it, I was just so angry, like I was just like, how come I've never heard of this before? Not in school, not in college, never heard of Circassians before. I think it's the worst way to find out your ethnicity is like that. Just realizing that there's no recognition. So it was it made me angry, but it fueled something in me. It fueled my desire to spread the word, to make that difference, to hope that because there are Circassians right now who don't even know that they're Circassian. They were probably adopted like I was. So it's kind of my goal to make sure that they don't find out like that. So that was kind of the processing for me. In regards to how it's affected social work, I have a bigger interest in adoption social work. That's been an interest of mine. I view international adoption as like a form of cultural genocide. And I still do like hospice social work. That is what I do, just mainly because there's a privilege that you have when you get to be with someone at the end of their life, and hear their story, and it's powerful.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you so much, Osama. We have a question in the comments from Minkova, right? Asking, thank you so much for your question. It's a great question. So it's about other countries recognizing the Circassian genocide. Elena, in your slide, you mentioned that only so far Georgia and Ukraine have recognized the genocide. And she's asking, like, is it important is it more important to you to educate people about it and show solidarity with others who have experienced it or are experiencing genocide? So like, how important is it that other nations recognize it? Maya, if you don't mind, I would love to have like a little rant on this topic. So knowing that there are so many Circassians in Turkey and Jordan and Syria, I mean, we'll just say like they were busy surviving under the Assad regime, but just between like even the ones in Israel, you know, the villages there, and the Circassians are on good terms with the government in all three of these countries. To me, it is a shame that these countries have not recognized Circassians or the genocide. It is like Iman is saying, it's disappointing, you know. It's one thing to say like, oh, the guards are Circassian, and look, we have this in our culture in our community, but like, why not just be like, by the way, recognize the genocide like one time, like in all these years, once. So for me, I'm just like, I heard someone saying, you know, oh, they can't because if they do, then they have to recognize all the other minorities. I'm like, okay, is that a problem? Like, I don't understand why this is an issue. Like, genocide people, at least you could just say, hey, we saw that you're genocided. So I'm like, that's my personal take on it. I know like in Jordan, they just, I think over the last year or maybe over a year now, they were on the cover of Vogue Arabia, and there was a royal wedding and they performed at the royal wedding. And, you know, on one hand, you're so proud, and I am truly, genuinely so proud, but I'm just like, it's very symbolic, you know, like as an American, Circassian, Muslim, whatever, you know, I kind of understand this concept of like, you just, it's like a symbolic solidarity. It's not really like the nitty gritty, like, yeah, we really stand with you kind of thing. So it's annoying, truly. Um, but you know, I'm waiting for the moment. I keep telling my friends here in Dallas, I'm like, if anybody could just get me like a 5-minute slot on the news, the local news, you know, just to complain a little bit, that would be more than enough. I'd be so happy to do that. So anyways, that's kind of how that feels.
Thank you, Nour.
No problem.
I can explain why I asked this question. So I come from the North Caucasus, and I read online a lot. I'm a member of many Circassian groups on Instagram, and I just know that when Ukraine recognized genocide this year, a lot of Circassians were kind of unhappy about it. They said that it was a provocation or something, and that's people who live in the North Caucasus. So obviously, for political reasons, they maybe have to disagree. I'm not sure. So I wasn't clear about. No, okay, I'm clear about how they feel. I understand that it's not allowed to show or, you know, approval that it's dangerous when you're there, but I wonder about how people in diaspora feel about it. I guess for them, it's a big step in the right direction, right?
Right. So yeah, I saw a lot of people in diaspora very happy about Ukraine's recognition, but I was probably from the people that was like, it's kind of funny. It's kind of like an interesting timing. And now with the new president here in America and his efforts to kind of end this whole Russia-Ukraine situation, according to him, you know, it does worry me, like, what does that mean down the road for the the Caucasus? The last thing I would ever want is for them to pay the price of something that's going on in diaspora, you know? So that's kind of like something that I'm always worried about when I'm on my page and I speak, because I know that even me personally, I've had Circassians who are from the homeland, but they lived in the West for a while, and they really don't like this free Circassia concept. They're like, it's very dangerous for our people back home that, you know, you guys are saying that out here. It's like, who's going to free Circassia? They're going to be forced to free Circassia. So unless you're willing to get on a plane and go and free it yourself, kind of keep it to yourself. But like, I always respond with like, you know, a girl can dream, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm not Oprah. I don't have like a huge, you know, sway in geopolitics. So me hoping or dreaming of a free homeland for my people, you know, is not like me putting it on them that it's their responsibility. It's like a wish, you know, just in my heart. But yeah, a lot of people, it is a very touchy subject.
Thank you, and
Yeah.
sorry if it's an uncomfortable question, but
No, it's fine.
It's an important question to ask, and I can draw on from my experience living in Syria during the regime's, like, you know, golden years. I remember being there when the civil war first broke out, and people are chanting from the West, "Free Syria! We want there to be a free Syria." And as someone who was living there under these conditions, I'm like, what do these people know? Like, they don't know anything to be chanting that. Come live here and then see what calling for a free Syria while you're outside, what that is doing to us in the current moment. And while in the long run, 15 years later, that was, you know, a great thing that happened and opened up so many new possibilities for us. But we did, and I only endured a small segment of it, but Syrians who stayed back home had to endure 15 years of, you know, ongoing civil war, of hunger, no electricity, you know, war. Half the population was displaced and or killed. So it's now living in the West, I understand that it's easy for us to point at a country and say, yeah, we need that to be free. But the actual people living there have to take on that experience to free it. So I just offer that perspective to maybe help us look at them with grace when we ask for a free Circassia. And it's a good place to begin to imagine how that could look like. You know, how might we free Circassia? I don't know. And to your question earlier, was that which is more important for us? I'm still at the point of exploring what this identity means and fueling myself with knowledge so I can just really understand my roots and my culture. And I hope that that leads me towards bigger action and more outreach to achieving this dream that we all dream of, belonging to a place we were once from.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Does anyone have? Oh, I was going to open it back up for any questions, thoughts, reflections, prayers. Yeah.
First of all, thank you, everyone. This was beautiful. I'm inspired and deeply honored to be related to the organizers, Nour and Maya, and to be Circassian. And two things that came up, one while Abe was speaking, is how do you think movement is related to the people that come up with the indigenous movement? For example, do you think that Circassian dance is specifically prescribed to Circassians? Is it somatically appropriate as a healing modality for Circassians? And what about Circassians nowadays that don't know how to dance Circassian? How can they open themselves up to somatic healing through movement if they don't know how to dance? Would that be the best approach for them to take to explore versus, you know, learning a different culture's dance? I'll let you guys answer that, but I'll ask my second question now at once. This is kind of for the team. I feel like Circassian culture, for as far as I've been alive, it's been painted with a paintbrush of sorrow, and rightfully so, because we come from a timeline of such pain and sorrow and horrific things done to our ancestors. But before that 101-year genocide, our culture was alive and thriving. People were happy. Their nervous systems were regulated. I like to imagine what life was like for them before the genocide, before our epigenetics became frantic and traumatized and carried this heaviness. What were those Circassians like? And I don't see much of that in our culture today. Our elders carry this like mournful, like heavy energy, and I'm curious what early day Circassians were before the genocide, to try to integrate both sides of us. Thank you.
Answer that all.
Yeah, yeah, you could take whichever part you like, the first or second or all.
First, Lean, it's so great to see you. That's the first thing I want to say that. The second thing, to answer the question, you know, and I want to make sure that I understood it first with clarity. It's like, if somebody doesn't know all the steps in Circassian dancing, is there another means to connect? Is that kind of what it is? Is that fair assessment?
That's fair.
Yeah. Is there more clarity to that question, just so I can make sure that I follow it?
That's an accurate representation.
Accurate representation. Okay. Um, I can only give my opinion on this. I don't know, conclusive answers to that. I don't think if somebody learns to spin on their feet and they learn to whirl and they practice that as such a divine and devotional art, is there a spinning in Circassian dance? Was there spinning in Circassian dance? Is there spinning in a waltz movement or samba or candomblé in, you know, and in more of a mysticism, you know, standpoint? I think that motion can be found in anything. I think the beauty of what I can imagine in my mind was the intentionality of ancestral rites and ancestral initiations. I wouldn't, I can't even imagine what it must have felt like to almost be naturally inclined and tuned in with this level of divine intentionality to whatever was being expressed through movement. And in that case, could there be a wrong step? Could there be a misstep if it's done with that level of pure intention and sincerity? My opinion is I don't think so. UNESCO, which probably all of us have mixed opinions on what UNESCO is. If you don't know what UNESCO is or does, probably you have mixed opinions, I'm almost certain. There was something that they termed as we all of us must be what's the word that they use for our cultural heritage? Living archives. We must be living archives of that. Motion to me is a living archive. So sometimes in dance, at least that I've seen in so many traditions, on one hand, I can see this beauty and devotion and this direct connection and this somatic process of almost like catharsis and healing happening. And then many other times I can see a show where somebody sells a ticket and you go and you sit in the audience and oh wow, that's pretty cool. And then, you know, 30 minutes later, you're maybe in our culture sitting on a couch and eating a burrito or something, and you're tuned out. What is the beauty about being so connected and tuned in? And maybe movement is a step. Maybe a martial art is a step. Maybe walking and looking at a tree. Before this call, I was thinking, what is Maya gonna ask on the call? I forgot what Maya was gonna even ask me. So I walked down my street and I looked at the tree and I said, man, what might have my ancestors done when they looked at a tree as magnificent as this? And just felt it and connected and tuned into that moment and moved forward. That to me felt somatically healing because I was in motion, I was observing, and I felt this wave cleanse my body. Not sure if that answers that question, but I think intentionality and sincerity probably fit into that. Yeah, I forgot the second question.
Second part was about Circassians prior to genocide.
And with
Yeah,
was it like with emotional regulation and things of that nature? In that?
No, that was not related to.
Oh, sorry.
I think Abe, you're off the hook for that. Dean, I have no problem answering this part of the question because this is something that I want so badly to experience. I mean, it's like it's in my dreams, it's in my daydreams. You know, what was it like for my ancestors to exist just in their essence, you know, hundreds of years ago? I, you know, just to take it back to Ibrahim was saying, so like every fall, I get this urge and it's like weird. It's like I every fall feel this feeling like I need to collect stuff. I need to like gather pine cones or gather acorns or like I need to garden, I need to be in the dirt outside, harvest, you know? And there's just so much to that feeling. I 100% link that to my ancestors. For me, when I craft, I work with my hands, I cook, I'm kneading, you know, cleaning some meat or I'm, you know, helping with something. Um, I feel connected to my ancestors. Like the satisfaction that it gives me is so deep. It's not something that I chose for myself. It's something that people were doing in my family for a long time before I got here. But your question was about, you know, how did they exist and how did they, right? That's what it was like beforehand. I mean, there's something in our history that most people don't really know about. It's the ancient Circassian gardens. There used to be gardens, and our people were fantastic at growing trees. You know, there's the story, the tradition of I think if a man wanted to start a family, he would have to grow like, if anybody knows, correct me if I'm wrong, like 70 trees or something and keep them alive in order to show that he could keep a family, basically, like he's family material. So in the Caucasus, they had every kind of tree, which amazingly enough, when our ancestors landed in the Golan Heights, they did so much of that. You know, they grew trees. They, you know, I think we can relate in that knowing any Jolani elder, you know, they love plants and they love like growing seeds and like they know little things like random tidbits about, you know, agriculture and planting and gardening. And it's just like, you know, living in a capitalistic, consumeristic, individualistic society here in the West, it takes you away from all of that. You know, it cuts you from all of that, that communal piece. You know, I have my boys and what I would do for a village, what I would do to have to know that my neighbors would be watching out for my kids the same way I would watch out for their children, you know? And if they mess up, they have to answer to more than just one set of grown-ups. So I mean, that to me is the beautiful part. If and when I ever step foot in the Caucasus, that'll be the thing that I'm hunting for, I think. And I think over there they still have glimpses of that. I see it on Instagram. You know, even the Circassians there, they dress up, they go out into the mountain, they are on a horse. They're just like, oh, you know, even them, they want to soak up that feeling of like, just want to reconnect with that feeling, that indigenous, like we're from this place, you know, feeling.
Yeah. Nour, the feeling I got from you speaking, especially when you were highlighting like kneading and gardening and doing these things, I was feeling a feeling of joy for you through these acts, and I feel like that in itself is a way to remember how our ancestors lived, joyous, to be in joy, to be connected to the love that they were connected to, is a direct plugging back into that who they were.
Right. I agree. I mean, those types of acts in general, there's a book, and it's called, oh my God. I'm gonna give it to you guys. I'll give it to you, Maya, so everyone else can get it. But it is about, first of all, any book that talks about indigenous practices is gold because there's so many similarities between indigenous people around the world. It's the geography that's the different part. But just about how they were just so at peace. They, with their children, with the women, you know, the roles of males and females within their society. I mean, it's just so, this is how humanity got to this point. You know, that was the best way for us to get to this point where we just proliferated for this long. If we had been individualistic from back then, we would never made it this far, you know, as like a species. It's an easier life. It's just happier.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
I'm aware that we're well over our time, so I want to give people who need to leave the chance to leave. And if more people want to hang around and ask some questions, we can do that for a few more minutes before we close the meeting. So, Elmira says, you guys know Circassians are the best comedians here in Russia.
You know, the Jolani, the generation that left the Golan Heights, that's elderly now and aging, I know from my, they have the most incredible sense of humor.
Yeah.
They're a riot. A little nuts, but they're so just special. Yeah, I'm always looking for Elmira. I'm always looking for like movies or clips or anything regarding Circassians. So if you have them, send them over.
Awesome.
I just want to say thank you, first of all, for all of you guys presenting and just how amazed I am by all of your guys's, how eloquent you guys speak and educated and just very deep. All these things that you guys were talking about, I definitely, a lot of it resonated with me, and I'm sure many other people on the call. So thank you so much for like putting this together. And like, it's my first time being able to hear from multiple Circassians in one place. I've only met one other family so far since I found out that I was Circassian. So hearing the community and how just like wonderful you guys are and just very just eloquent, and I keep saying eloquent because that's how I felt when I was hearing you guys. It was just like amazing. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Can I ask where you're based?
I'm in Dallas, Texas.
What?
Yeah.
Who else
Are
lives
you
in Dallas?
Are you in the WhatsApp group, girl?
Yes, I am. I met Larissa and her family, but
Oh,
they're the only ones I've met so far.
you have to come to dance practice. You'll meet everyone there.
Yeah, I've only ever seen like the kids practice. I feel kind of like awkward showing up as like the only adult.
Don't feel the instructors are all adults. You're more than
Yeah,
welcome.
that's true.
You're more than
Yeah.
welcome to come.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That's so nice. Thank you so much for popping in. So we have in Dallas, you'd never guess, but a pretty substantial Circassian communities, tons of families, bunch of kids. I think the size of our dance group has now surpassed the California dance group count. So we got quite, you got a couple, you know, we're coming up. We have two amazing instructors, and everyone else is just there to support them. And Larissa, she's my partner in crime, and I basically wanted to make a dance group for my kids. It's like so selfish. I'm like, it's for me, but like everybody come with me, you know? Just because, you know, the realization of how different family looks from generation to generation, you know, from language, just cultural transmission in general is so different for our people from generation to generation. So I'm like, whatever I can put together for them, you know, is important, whatever little bit, because outside of our home and that dance class, you know, what Circassian is there besides, you know, family like cousins and stuff out here in Dallas. So
Yeah, I'll definitely have to stop by. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm so glad you came. Anybody else? Natasha, Hasbik, Iman. Okay, well, if everyone kind of has their, you know, no one has anything left to say, I'm gonna hand it off to Maya to put the cherry on top.
Yeah, just want to extend gratitude for the Circassians in my circle that jumped at the opportunity to host this event together. You know, I'm so grateful to not only live alongside you, but to know each of you personally and in this beautiful way, and to have manifested this event in one way or another. So thank you. Truly, thank you for being you and for doing what makes you beautiful.
Oh my God, coming from
And
you.
thank you to everyone for coming out today. This was really beautiful for me. And these spaces are motivated by my own just yearning to connect with this. And like you said, Nour, when we do it for ourselves and just invite people to come with, it just feels so much better.
Community, I mean, that's what we're fighting for here. We're fighting for that connection and a world where it's all just about being an individual and just feeding the self. So you guys make life richer, you know, so it's a more beautiful experience when you get to share what you love with people who can appreciate it. So I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. It's my honor. Osama, thank you so much for being like our tech support. Lean was our digital bouncer, which thankfully she didn't have to bounce anybody. Abraham, thank you so much just for sharing your wisdom and your light and everything you know. Elena, I mean, girl, you have such a spot in my heart, like from the minute that we met and we talked. And thank you so much to everybody. Maya, I already told you how I feel.
I got you, Noor. All right, well, have a good night, everyone. We'll be in touch soon with a follow-up email, inshallah.
Awesome.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thank you.
All right.
You guys are still recording.